So the first team we're going to be doing in our Atlantic Division preview is the Boston Celtics. So they made a number of key moves, obviously re-signing Jaylen Brown to the Supermax contract, the $304 million over 5 years, obtaining Kristaps Porzingis in a trade, but they did, however, lose Marcus Smart to the Memphis Grizzlies as part of that Kristaps Porzingis trade, and also Grant Williams to the Dallas Mavericks. In terms of how they're looking for this upcoming season, what do you make of the moves they made in the offseason? Did it actually help improve their roster, or has it been a detriment to their particular situation? Marcus, I'd love to hear from you on this particular matter.
So the Boston Celtics, when you look at the fact that they got rid of Marcus Smart, someone who they drafted, and if he was to stay, he'd probably be there for as long as he possibly could. Obviously, the NBA, it's not necessarily a players' league. It's very rare that one player stays at the same organization for their whole career. At the end of the day, they made a move to bolster their roster and bring in a guy like Kristaps Porzingis. They continuously go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and look, if they think Kristaps is that guy to push them over the edge, I do not hate this move. Do I think they got better getting rid of Grant Williams and Marcus Smart? Not necessarily. I actually really rate those two players, and I know Kristaps has the upside and potential to be an NBA superstar. The story of his career, he hasn't necessarily been healthy, but overall, do I think it was the right move to make? Yes, I do, because you do have to make that move if you want to go further to the finals and almost take that risk. So I had the Celtics winning as a predictor 50 games, being the 4th to 7th seed. The key ins, I like the prospect of Danilo Banton at the point guard position, and then O'Shea Brissett, but there's no doubt, favourite signing, if I had to pick one, Kristaps Porzingis. Yeah, also the draft pick, Jordan Walsh, out of Arkansas, I believe. He was projected once upon a time to be like a lottery talent, and who knows, we've seen them develop a guy like Grant Williams. To me, Jordan Walsh is a similar mold to a Grant Williams, someone who can play the 3 to 4, maybe even small ball 5, and he's got plenty of upside there. It's just, can he string all the physical tools together with his already ready NBA game, if that makes sense. But yeah, overall, what moves would I like to see? To me, nothing really. Like, they've already taken that risk to try to compete for an NBA championship. In terms of buffering their roster even more, I was going to say guard, but they already have Brogdon and Derek White over there. So those are two quality NBA guards. And yeah, they could go on the route and potentially sign a guy like John Wall if they wanted to take that risk. But besides that, look, they kept a hold of Jaylen Brown. They brought in those players. They drafted John Walsh, brought in Porzingis. Yeah, let's see if they can all put pen to paper and potentially win a championship over the next couple seasons.
Couldn't agree more with you. Like, in terms of the Porzingis situation, like you said, he's been a bit injured over his career with the Knicks. Obviously had the ACL, and when he was with the Dallas Mavericks throughout that playoff run, he was absent from that particular moment when they probably needed him. And, there's always this question mark, can he play second fiddle? We saw it in numerous occasions where, he kind of didn't want to take a back seat necessarily. So is that something that he might need to adapt to, especially with two alphas in Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown on this particular team? But I love what he brings to this particular organization, the new dimension to the team. That's something that they haven't maybe had in the last few seasons, a high-level scoring threat from the 4 or the 5 spot. Adds that front court scoring prowess, and also the rim protection, and it just adds to that front court defensive structure that they do have, and the top-end defensive talent on that side of the ball with Robert Williams and Al Horford, who are both really solid defenders from the 4 and the 5 spot. And like you mentioned, the Jordan Walsh pick, I think, he could turn into anything. And the fact that they traded the 25th pick to get him at pick 38 and ended up having 4 additional second-round draft picks, I think is a win in that particular side of things. And in terms of the moves I'd like to see possibly out of this particular group, maybe adding a guy like Saddiq Bey for the traded player exception. Obviously, what they got out of trading Grant Williams to the Dallas Mavericks, they could use that particular traded player exception to bring in a guy like that who's a 40% three-point shooter, who's had a 50-piece in this league. And then even a guy like Kelly Oubre Jr., who's coming off a career year where he's averaging 20.3 points per game. He went a little bit under the radar because that team really did suck this year, the Charlotte Hornets. So maybe you could consider it as empty stats, but a guy like that, who could play a bit of small ball 4, I think it would be a really good complementary piece to this particular roster. But again, it will just depend on whether they could fit him in or whether he's asking for too much in terms of on the money side of things. But I think the one thing about the Celtics, that the question mark that they had in terms of the move that they made in this offseason, was obviously the re-signing of Jaylen Brown to that Supermax. A lot of people questioning, did they overpay for him? I mean, when you look at it in hindsight, that TV deal's coming up in the next couple of seasons. It's estimated to be $75 billion over 8 years.
Jesus.
Yeah, there's a lot of money on the table there. So the salary cap's obviously going to increase. So on the back end of this deal, you're probably going to get a pretty good value out of it. And in saying that, the true estimate of this deal, if you take into account that the salary cap is going to increase, is probably around that $280 million mark from what I read. So it actually doesn't end up being as
much as we think,
expensive as... Yeah, correct. They always see that the big number there, the $300 million, and they automatically they get scared off by that and they jump to conclusions. But I think obviously there is pressure on them to win this championship, especially giving up the heart and soul of that team in Marcus Smart, who bleeds green and white. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, and hopefully, they can take that next step. But you never know with how the playoffs play out, as we've seen the last few seasons, with the favorites get bowed out, and people that we expect to perform in the playoffs don't have the best kind of showing. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. But the grade I gave him was a B+. I thought that they did lose some important pieces, but they did gain something back. And re-signing Jaylen Brown, acquiring Jordan Walsh, getting those 4 second-round picks as well, and then getting Kristaps Porzingis and some bench depth in Delano Banton and O'Shea Brissett, I think sort of outweighed those losses. But overall, I have him winning 54 games and finishing anywhere from 2nd to 4th in the Eastern Conference. But what did you have him for the grade? I didn't. You've actually given one.
I actually forgot to give him a grade, but because they got rid of Grant Will and they got rid of Marcus Smart, obviously the main asset that they did bring in, Porzingis, obviously O'Shea Brissett and Danilo Banton, those are like 2, high upside potential guys, but they're not proven in the NBA yet. But the fact they went out and made that move, I really do rate. So look, I could say it's a C in terms of like the value that they gave up to get Porzingis, because I do think it's an even type of, situation there. But because they needed to make a move, I have to give them a B, because look, they did right by the organization. They're trying to win. It's the Boston Celtics way. They always want to compete, and it's a contingency step that had to be made.
Hello, yes, you at home. This is Commissioner of the NBA speaking to you, Adam Silver. Here's a message in courtesy of BenchMob in collaboration with the NBA Store. When BenchMob hits 1,000 subscribers, they'll be giving away a free NBA jersey to a lucky subscriber, so just do all the things.